Welcome to the Stop Over Drinking and Start Living podcast, where high-achieving, goal-oriented rebel women come to learn how to live a vibrant and fulfilling life without requiring alcohol to get through it. No labels, no judgments, no saying you'll never drink again. Just real proven methods to help you stop rebelling against yourself with alcohol so you can drink less and do more. I'm your host, Angela Mascenik. Let's dig in. Welcome to episode 172, interview with Veronica Valli, Soberful author. Hello, hello, hello. Ooh, I am so excited about this podcast. Veronica Valli is an author and a sobriety coach, and she just wrote an amazing book that was just launched this year in January called Soberful, Uncover Sustainable, Fulfilling Life Free of Alcohol. And she asked to come on my podcast. Whoop, whoop. Feeling kind of special. Thank you so much for coming, Veronica. Her bio reads, Veronica is a former psychotherapist who now works as a sobriety coach with almost 20 years of experience. She has helped thousands of people reach their full potential and live happy, healthy lives by being alcohol-free. She's been the keynote speaker at annual conferences such as Women for Sobriety and is the co-host of her popular Soberful podcast. Learn more at soberful.com. We'll link up all of the socials for Veronica. You should also go buy her book. It's really, really good, and it supports everything that I talk about, getting to the root of why we're over drinking and all that fun stuff. So it's Soberful, Soberful, available on any place where you buy books. I hope you enjoy the episode. Oh, and hey, I'm hosting a wine-free weekend challenge. It's at the end of April, or actually it's in about 2 weeks. Click through the link, get the date, sign up. But we're going to do this challenge on the weekend, y'all. So before you say, no, I don't want to, go click through, sign up, and come join me. Learn some actual tools about how to deal with social situations, the end of the work week type stress and stuff that you normally drink from. Have fun, be supportive. I'm going to be coming on live every day during the 3 days of the wine-free weekend challenge to support you. And there's fun prizes to be won, y'all. So click through and sign up. Okay, talk to you soon. Welcome to the podcast, Veronica. How are you?
I'm good. It's nice to be here, Angela.
So nice to have you. So I did a little intro before you came on, but why don't you tell the audience, my audience, a little bit about yourself, and we can just jump in from there.
Yeah, so I'm a sober woman. I'm coming up to next month, May 2nd, I'll be 22 years sober. I got sober when I was 27. Formerly a psychotherapist in the UK. I work as a sober coach here in the USA, and I've had some books out. One that just came out in January called Soberful, which is my program. And I'm a mom of 2 boys, and I'm married and live in Lake Tahoe.
Awesome. Thank you. So let's talk a little bit about when you were 27 and you decided to give up alcohol. Like, what was happening for you? Like, tell me about your relationship with alcohol a little bit and what happened there.
So I never had a good relationship with alcohol. You know, it's interesting looking back, and I look at the culture that I grew up in. Not drinking alcohol was never an option. It's just presumed that you do, and I couldn't wait. You know, I just thought it was the gateway to adulthood and excitement and fun. I couldn't wait. So, you know, this is back in the 80s. I was getting into bars and nightclubs at 14 years old because I could look old enough. You know, girls could do that with makeup and high heels. And I never drank normally, ever. I was blackout drunk at 15, lying in gutters, covered in my own vomit. Drinking made me very, very, very sick. And, you know, this is what's really interesting. I mean, I'm highly allergic to alcohol. Like, whenever I drink alcohol, I would throw up. And I would be, like, ill in bed and be, you know, off for several days. But it never occurred to me that I didn't have to do that. That was kind of crazy. I just thought, you know, well, it's just the price of all the fun I'm having.
Right.
And my peer group just reinforced that to me, that this was the best way to have fun. You know, that's just how that was.
And like, I think it too, like for me, similar situations in college, like we're encouraged. Like we're like, heck yeah, look at how much we partied last night, right? Like we celebrated that sometimes.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it was, on the brink of the 90s when drinking changed for women, it was definitely presented to us as feminism, like drinking
Mhm.
like the boys, all of that kind of stuff. And I really fully embraced that. So I also did drugs. I did a lot of hallucinogenic drugs. And I always say to people, I had a great time for about 2 or 3 years. I mean, there was always a
Mhm.
cost, but I had a great time. And then at
Mhm.
18, it all went badly wrong. I went into drug-induced psychosis. Um, I didn't know that at the time, and I couldn't tell anyone. I was suicidal. Um, I had really bad panic attacks. I was paranoid. I had auditory hallucinations, and it was really terrifying. I mean, it changed overnight, and it took me a long time to be able to tell anyone or ask for help. And even then, I was sort of a bit like, even just saying how I felt, I just thought if I say it, then it's going to be real. Like if I
Right.
don't say it, maybe it will just go away.
Yeah.
So then from 18 to 27, my drinking changed very quickly because and I realize now this is very common. In fact, I don't think I've met anyone who has an alcohol problem and doesn't suffer from some kind of anxiety. But very quickly you make the connection, like when there's stuff that, like socializing or things you have to deal with, a drink, two drinks would make you feel okay. You could deal with that situation. So very quickly, my drinking went from the binge drinking party girl to drinking in secret and drinking to cope. And I remember being
Mhm.
at university when I was about 22, and I couldn't sit in lectures because I'd have a panic attack and have to leave, and I was failing. So in England, I could go down to the student union bar at lunchtime and have like a pint and a half of lager was be enough to get me through the afternoon. But if it was a morning lecture, I was screwed. And I remember having vodka in my Coke bottle and necking it in the toilets at 8:30 a.m. so I could go to a 9 a.m. lecture. And I remember thinking, this isn't right. Like this isn't right. Who does this on
Right.
a Tuesday morning at 8:30? And I remember thinking, this is what alcoholics do. And I thought, well, I'm not an alcoholic because I'm not enjoying it. And alcoholics enjoy it. That was my rationalization. And
Right.
and so I drank to cope with my anxiety, and I looked for help everywhere. I went to a lot of, I went everywhere, professionals, churches, you name it, anywhere. I just was so desperate for
Mhm.
peace. I was so desperate to feel safe and to be free of anxiety. And eventually, I met someone when I was 27 who was sober in AA, and I never knew that was a thing, and was like, wow, you could be sober? Like, that's the thing people do. And
Yeah.
that kind of planted some seeds, and I eventually stopped drinking. I was very, I didn't really know. It wasn't hugely a conscious choice. I wasn't like a long-term thing. It was just for today. I wasn't
Right.
sure. And then I just began to feel better. And then things began to kind of click.
Yeah. Yeah. So you didn't like go into it at that time to be like, I'm gonna give up alcohol forever.
No, I never. I thought my problem, I knew I had a problem, and I thought my problem was a rare mental health condition that nobody else on the planet had, only me. I didn't. Now
Mm.
I'd stopped using all drugs when I had went into drug-induced psychosis, but in the last like 2 or 3 years of my drinking, I'd started using cocaine and ecstasy, and
Mhm.
I knew I shouldn't use cocaine. Like cocaine brought me to my knees. Like in fact,
Mhm.
I actually think without cocaine, I would have still drunk for another 10 years. It just screwed my serotonin. It finished me off. I was a wreck. So I knew that cocaine's not a good idea, but I just thought you have to manage alcohol. And like, I just thought that's what you did. I didn't ever know that that was an option to not drink. So I just thought I just have to manage it. And all of these, I felt like I was sleepwalking. I was, beginning to, I'd enrolled in a course and I was learning about different things. And then things just began. And I was really on the fence, I think, for about 3 or 4 months. And I started going to 12-step meetings because there was nothing else back then. This was 2000. And I didn't relate, didn't identify, didn't really feel that it was for me until I heard a middle aged man, talk about fear and the way that fear had always governed his life. and how he drank because of fear. And that was like my kind of light bulb moment, because I thought I was the only person in the whole world who had ever felt that way. And when it was revealed, and then I was like, oh my God, I'm so unoriginal. I'm like, and everybody's like, yeah, I feel the same way. I'm like, really? Oh my God. And it was
Wow.
such a relief to know
Yes.
that I was not the only person who felt like that. It was such a
Yeah.
relief. And I was like, and then, people start saying there's a solution to that. You have to do the 12 steps. And I was just like, sign me up. I'll do anything to feel better and feel normal.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you. I mean, it sounds like that was a good decision for you, right? Like it's been 20 years. So congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a journey, and I've done lots of other things. Therapy. I've read, everything. I worked. I want to say the first 5 years I worked. I mean, it's never stopped, but the first 5 years in particular, I worked really hard on myself.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, I had similar situations. So I found my sobriety through life coaching. And I think for me, it was more of that gray area drinker. But I suffered with that for 20 fucking years. So I didn't, I started early, late teens through college, heavy drinking, partying, and then getting more to professional life, like using alcohol at the end of the day and wine to escape the anxiety. I mean, again, there's the
Hmm.
anxiety and the overwhelm. And the tools that I found with life coaching, which is like basically how to feel your feelings, right? Like naming your feelings, identifying your feelings, pausing and processing them, right? And looking at how you're thinking about things in your life. Like those tools help me so much. And now I've been sober for almost 4 years. But in the past year is where I feel like I've done even more deeper work. Like I've been seeing a psychotherapist, and like that's more of like the recovery for me. So it's kind of like I got the alcohol out of the way, and then like really like the patterns and the old shit to why I was probably drinking in the first place. Now I'm actually healing that. So it's a different journey for everybody for sure. But I agree that it'll never end. Like I think it's fascinating now.
Yeah, and that's for me growth. The growth
Yeah.
never ends. More is revealed.
Yeah.
Because you realize when you get sober, like alcohol was a symptom. I had real issues in romantic relationships and around attachment and abandonment. So that all needed to be worked through. Really low self-confidence. There was just a lot of stuff that had never. I was just, like I said, I was sleepwalking through my life. I wasn't
Yeah.
growing, wasn't developing. And
Hmm.
alcohol, when you get rid of alcohol, and then all of that stuff comes up, and it's an invitation to do that work, which I think some people feel scared of. I certainly probably did at the beginning. I know I did. But now I just embrace it, because I just know that growth leads to just more awesome stuff.
Yeah. Yeah, that was actually one of the things I wanted to talk about. I wrote down. So you have a section in your book called The Pillar of Growth. And,
Mm.
for me to paraphrase this, I'd love to hear
Hmm.
your direct thoughts about it. But basically, it's like your capacity for feeling uncomfortable and to
Mm.
challenge yourself, right? And like working through that. So talk a little bit about the pillars of growth.
Yeah, the pillar of growth is the fifth pillar of sobriety, and we all have the call to growth. Like, as long as you have breath in your body, you're being called to grow. As a mother, or as a wife, as a coach, as a human being, as a woman, we're being called to grow, and that's delicious, because it can be exciting and all kinds of things, but it's also always going to be a bit scary, and we're also going to resist it a bit. It's really interesting. I don't think about alcohol. I mean, like, I think about alcohol because of my job, but I don't
Right.
personally like think about not drinking or alcohol. It just doesn't
Yeah.
exist in my
Yeah.
world.
Mhm.
I have alcohol in my house for people who come for dinner and want to have a glass of wine. I don't even notice it. Um, a few months before my book came out, I think it was about 3 or 4 months before my book came out, I started noticing alcohol. And I'd never, like, after the second or third time, I'm like, hang on a minute. I'm like, I'm not, I'm just kind of like, that looks nice. Yeah, that looks refreshing. Gosh, wonder what that tastes like. I'm not going to have any, but. And after a little while, I'm like, what's that? Like, hang on a minute. Like, this isn't normal. What's going on? And then I finally spoke to someone about it, and I realized what it was an upper limit. The book
Mhm.
release was getting really, really close, and lots of things were happening. It was going to be it was a new thing. Like
Yeah.
I've done 100 interviews, and I kind of started thinking, gosh, wouldn't it be something if I relapse now? Right? Wouldn't that be something?
Right.
And
Oh,
when I had that thought, I thought, oh my gosh, this is an upper limit. You are growing into somebody who
mhm.
has a book out, and that's new. Even though you want that, there's something a bit scary about it. And as soon as I had that realization, I stopped having these little fantasies. But I thought it was really
Yeah.
interesting in that that's what happens is, we want to do a thing, like we want to do a thing, we want to do it, and then we get to the edge of it, and then we start going, whoa.
Right.
We start because the ego starts making us feel uncomfortable, and do we really want the thing, and do we really want to change? So we're constantly going to be in that process. And for me, it
Mhm.
helped enormously knowing that what was happening in that process, like knowing this was a call to growth, knowing this was going to feel uncomfortable, but also knowing I could get through it, that things would change, that I'd be glad that I kind of buckled down and did whatever it was. So
Mhm.
it's really interesting. And we don't, we all of us will have moments where we get the call to growth and we get to the edge and go, oh, I know I've done it. But the thing is that will often come round again, that call.
Yeah, and I think it's interesting too, like when it does come around again, our brain is often triggered to go into old comforting patterns, right? And for you, even though
Mm.
it's been 20 years, your
Mm-hmm.
brain's like, ooh, what would that be like, right? Just because
Yeah.
it's an old pattern, it's still there, but like you've done so much work on it that it's still like, I wonder if that might help her.
Yeah,
Right?
and it was only for a few weeks, and
Yeah,
like I was made the joke a couple of times, like, oh, wouldn't it be funny? Like, that would be something,
right.
And then it's really interesting how the subconscious mind works in trying to keep us in just not moving from where we are in whatever way
Yeah,
it can.
yeah. So good. All right, so I had another thing I wanted to talk to you about. So, let me see here. So the bandwidth, right? So like our emotional bandwidth that you talk
Mm,
about, you compared it to 2G
mm,
Wi-Fi, which I thought
mm.
was so brilliant. Let me read that part in the book actually. Let's see. That's on page 32. Hold on. So you write, the biggest price I see people pay is their precious bandwidth. Alcohol costs us scope and breath. It costs us energy, resources, and time. And we have to decide if our relationship with alcohol is worth that loss. Going through life without full access to this bandwidth is like having to put up with 2G internet. I mean, it works, but the video and downloads are slow and pictures don't load. It's frustrating that we can do some things, but not everything the way we want. But for some reason, we put up with it because it hasn't occurred to us yet that we don't have to drink, that we could actually live our entire lives not drinking and be completely fulfilled and happy with access to 100% of our bandwidth. I love that. Talk to us a little bit about that.
Yeah, it's really you. I think sometimes we ask the wrong question. I see this a lot. Like, is drinking that bad? Is it really that bad? It's
Yeah.
not like and that's the question that people ask themselves. And I would always reverse that and said, well, is this good enough for you? Are you happy with,
Yes.
the hangovers and the kind of embarrassment about the things you said at the weekend and the just feeling a bit down for heart? Like, is that good enough? Because it completely changes your perspective of it. And we we in our culture we have been, I think, conditioned to think that an alcohol problem is someone who's homeless, basically, homeless,
Right. Like you're
drinking
in
around
the
the clock.
gutter, you're in the ditch.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And everyone else who looks like you and me, Angela,
Hmm.
who drinks, we're fine. Like, we're
Hmm.
fine. We'll do dry January every so often. We're fine. And I actually think it's the reverse that's true. I think it's, and people, we have, the cost of drinking has been deliberately, very deliberately obscured. Very
Hmm.
deliberately. And that, with that messaging of, there's just a few people who just can't handle it. They're alcoholics. They can't ever drink again. But everyone else can manage it. So one of the costs is our bandwidth. And it's like when you kind of take a step back and think about your life and the finite amount of time that you have and the people in it, do you really want to waste your time having an argument with yourself about whether you're going to drink tonight or not? Or whether you're worrying about whether people are thinking about your drinking, or should you just have 2 glasses, or should you have a night off. Like, that's such a pointless, meaningless waste of our time and energy. Yet we put a lot of time and energy into thinking about drinking and thinking about not drinking. And that's
Yeah.
bandwidth. And my experience has been, when people get sober, they get access to this magic bandwidth, which is energy and space to think thoughts.
Hmm.
And that's where our extraordinariness is. That we you and because you can do a lot with 70% bandwidth. You can have a high flying career and a family and all those kind of things. On the outside, everything looks good, but what you can't do is emotionally grow the way that you're capable of. And going back to growth, that emotional growth is the biggest gift that you can possibly imagine.
I could not agree more. I mean, the amount of time that I spent planning my drinks, picking out the
Mm.
best wine that I wanted to have. I was such a wine snob that like I would go to a party or at a restaurant, like I don't know if they're gonna have it. So I would like go bring it, go shop for it, go pick it up, go bring it myself, take it to the party, figure out how I was gonna get home, right? Like, and then deal with not waking up on time, slogging my way. If it was on the weekend, forget about it. I had to plan. I actually would plan to be hungover and to not do anything until at least noon. So like talk about a time and energy suck, right? And
Right,
like it just never,
planning to be hungover.
I know it's
Right.
insane, right? Like
Yeah.
but when you're in it, it's just like this, like what you were saying about with your youth, right? It's like you didn't that's just what you did. Of course I'm going to be hungover. I'm drinking. It's Friday night, you know?
Yeah.
So like now that that's not in my life, right? And you know this too because you've created this book, like your business, everything. There's just so much more capacity. I have better relationships. I make more money. I have everything around my life, externally and internally, is better. And I just think if people knew what is possible and they could actually see what would be possible in their lives, they would be willing to do that work. But some people can't even get out of that. What do you want to say to people that like what is
Yeah.
like the one thing that you want to say to people that might be willing for them to be open to exploring it?
My purpose is really to come and smash those belief systems.
Hmm.
Um, and the belief system is that alcohol's the best way to have fun, excitement, belonging, and connection. And that's a perception, not a reality. Now, I want to say you can drink and have fun and excitement and belong, connection, and relax and reward yourself, but there's always a cost.
Right.
There's some new research coming out about the link to breast cancer in women, and it's really like 2 or 3 glasses a week
Yeah.
will significantly raise it beyond 20%. So, and I think a lot of people will be shocked that I think most people think 2 or 3 glasses of wine is nothing, but actually that's
Hmm.
a lot. So that's a cost. And it's like, are you prepared to pay that cost? I want to smash the belief system that alcohol equals fun and sober equals boring. And that, oh, poor us, we're just like missing out, like just living this
And we're
boring,
deprived and we miss it all
oh,
the time and we want it
deprived.
all the time, right? And
Yeah, we're
like we think
so
about it and
deprived.
it's terrible.
Like that is the biggest lie that has ever been
Yeah.
told. But it feels very true. When I stopped drinking at 27, I 100% thought my life was over.
Yeah.
100%. At
Right.
27, my peer group was going out every weekend and getting wasted. And I was like, it's so unfair. They're having
Yeah.
such a great time. And I'm just, ugh. And I want to say at the beginning, there was some boring nights because that there was a big adjustment. But it's all about perspective, because 2 or 3 years down the road, I would see those people and go, oh, that looks awful. That
Right.
really doesn't look like fun. And, you
Yeah.
look terrible the next day. And I was going out. I was going to concerts and nightclubs and festivals and having a great time and dancing and socializing. So it feels very, very true, but I want people to know it's a perception. And with a little bit of time and a little bit of effort, your perception can shift massively. And that's why people like you and me are so passionate about sobriety, because it's like, oh my God, who knew, right? Like, wow.
It's like the I like how it's like the biggest lie ever, right? Is like that being
Mm,
sober is boring. That was my biggest fear. I think it's a lot of my clients' biggest fears. Like, I don't want to be boring. I don't want to be left out. What am I going to
Yes.
do?
It's the number one
Right?
thing. Yeah.
Yeah, it's just like, and that I think is that upper limiting thing. Like, as you are like, okay, you recognize there's an issue and you want to change it, right? And then your brain comes in and it's like, hey, you might be boring. And then that's like enough of a fear to like stop us from doing it. And
Yeah. And
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 then it
then
goes
it
back to the growth, like your willingness to lean into that. And like, it's okay to be bored once in a while. Like, it's not really
mm,
a problem. If you're
mm.
bored or if your life looks a little boring for a couple months while you figure that out, it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you have the thing. I don't know if you've had that when I'd be like, you see drunk people think, God, they're boring, so
Well,
boring. They just drink.
honestly, this is what I say all the time. I'm like, I think over drinking is boring. It's the same patterns over and over and over again. Like, how long are you going to keep doing that same thing? Oh, say you're not going to do it, do it. Say you're not going to do it,
Yeah,
do it. Be
yeah,
hungover, be sloppy,
yeah,
overeat
yeah,
all the crap food. That's fucking boring.
yeah. And that's
What's
that.
not boring is on the other side, right? Is like when you're living your life, like, I flew to LA for 2 days for 48 hours this past week, danced my ass off, met all these new people, networked, had fun, got a little sunburn, flew home in time for my birthday. Like, that's not fucking boring.
Yeah,
I never would have done that. I would never would have put myself there, or I would have drank on the plane, something crazy, right? Like, not remembered at all.
yeah.
Yeah.
One of the ones I hear a lot is about going on vacation. Like, oh, but I'm going on vacation, and like margarita by the beach, and it's like, I mean, we have a timeshare we go to with my kids, and I see the people who drink, and it's just, they look really hungover, and then they start drinking in the afternoon, hair of the dog, 'cause they're on vacation, and then they go out to the bars, and that's what they do. And I'm just gonna say we don't. It's not like we do a whole lot. We're just like the pool and the beach with the kids. But it's like I've been on vacations and I've been like, God, I've been missing out. We get up early, we
Yeah.
go and do stuff. We're hiking, we're doing this, we're so busy, and just alcohol ruins all of that. It's all about perception,
Yeah.
about what we think it brings us, and we
Mhm.
ignore the cost. And yeah, my mission is to really kind of expose that, and it makes people uncomfortable. I know it does. When
Mhm.
I've done a lot of press interviews, and I found it so interesting working with like TV and news outlets, and nobody wants to hear the message that you can have more fun sober and it's better. Nobody wants to hear that message. They say to my like publicist, like, well, could she come on and give tips for cutting down, like just some tips for and I'm like,
Yeah,
well,
well,
yeah,
I
I
also
can,
think
but
it's like some of these outlets are like paid for by alcohol companies too. So
hmm
like they don't want to like burn their bread and butter. And so I face the same thing when I'm trying to like advertise or something like that in some network. And it's like, well, I can't advertise in the Delta Sky Lounge because we're promoting our free drinks. And so we don't
yeah,
want you coming in and saying like
yeah,
stop over drinking because we
yeah.
also have that balance. Isn't that crazy?
Yeah,
But
it's the what it is. It's the emperor's new clothes. That's what it is.
mm,
No,
yeah,
nobody wants to be told the emperor is naked. They don't want to hear like
yep,
la 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 la. Stick their head. No, 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 don't.
yep.
Just tips for cutting. Like, and I'm like, no, yeah, emperor's naked and pretty ugly.
So
Great
funny.
big belly.
Yes. Um, Talk about halt a little
Mm.
bit. So halt is the hungry, angry, lonely, and tired. I love this.
Yeah, so that's in the chapter about balance, and
Mhm.
that's one of the things that you have to learn in sobriety is about balance, is balancing your needs.
Mhm.
And I didn't even know how to recognize I had needs or how to balance them. And Halt is a really good place to start, in that those are very immediate needs, and they also have a very immediate impact on our sobriety if we don't take
Mhm.
care of them. So, hunger, obviously, we have to eat, but it's about what we eat and when we eat. But it's also kind of, I think, recognizing what the hunger is for. Is it just for food or is it for something else? Anger, that's just going to fuel a resentment, and resentment is the free drunk. Um, that's what people with an alcohol problem want more than anything, is a free drunk, which is,
Mhm.
my boss has pissed me off on Tuesday, and I'm just like, so feel like such, it's so unfair and it's just not right, and da 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 da. And that by Friday I'm like, fuck it. Yeah, I will come to
Yeah,
happy hour. I just don't like, if you'd had the week I'd had, and it's not
right.
my, like, I'll have a drink. it's not my fault. It's my boss's fault. What he said on Tuesday, that's the free drunk, and
Right.
we love that. So it's not that we can't get angry; it's what we do with it. And my experience is, I think one of the biggest things that people struggle with in alcohol problem is loneliness. I think we have an epidemic of loneliness, and for me that was the biggest thing. I was so lonely when I was drinking, and I always had people to drink with. I just felt so disconnected from myself, just so lonely, and that continued into early sobriety because everything stopped and changed, and there was times in the beginning that it was boring and I was lonely, and that's where sobriety groups made all the difference for me. Like I just had, having a whole weekend with no plans was terrifying for me. So I'd go to 12-step meetings, and then I'd make a few friends, and then we'd go for coffee, and then there'd be a movie trip, and that's how my life started. From there my life grew to, I can't remember the last time I was lonely. But I think we have to be purposeful and work on that. People are not going to just show up at our door and go, "Oh, you look nice, come out." We have to show up
Right.
consistently and let people know us. And I think tired, it's not, just kind of, alcohol screws up our body chemistry so badly. Just getting enough sleep and you, I was a workaholic. I've definitely gone into workaholism and burnout and getting too tired, and listening to my body. All of this is about listening to our bodies, and I never listened to my body when I was drinking. I was cut off from it, just cut off from it.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are just like triggers, right? The hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Like I think for that really resonated with me. It's like if you can recognize that, even if you're not super in tune with how you feel or you don't feel super connected to yourself, which we don't when we're going through this, right? You can recognize all of these things pretty easily, right? And so like recognizing when you are super tight, if you didn't sleep well at night, that could be a trigger for me to drink. Or if you're
Yeah,
lonely or
yeah,
hungry, like how does this show up in my patterns? Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, I want to actually go back to something you said that was really interesting about that you always had the fine wine and you went and bought the fine wine. That's a really common disguise for an
Hmm.
alcohol problem. That's one of the
Yeah.
most common disguises. Like, no, I only drink fine wine. I don't have a
Right.
problem. I only drink the best
When you
whiskey.
were picky about it,
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
like you care too much about it, right?
yeah. It's a really common disguise. So
Yeah.
I was talking to a doctor a while ago who we were on a TV show, and she kind of launched into an hour of explaining to me why she didn't have a drink problem, because she has lots of clients in Napa and she only has wine from their vineyards, but her drinking did creep up a little bit over the lockdown, and she did mention to her son that she was going to stop for a bit, and they laughed at her and said, "You'll never do that, mum." And then we were on this TV show and she was talking about she was quite happy that if her clients have 2 glasses of wine a night. And I was just like horrified. I'm like, 2 glasses of wine for women every night is a hell of a lot of alcohol. And as a doctor, well, you should know, will significantly increase your chances of getting colon or breast cancer. But that's the kind of, like, you just reminded him, like, how we disguise our
Yeah, we
drinking. And that's a
glamorize it.
common one.
Yeah, for sure. I got married in a freaking winery in Sonoma. I lived in San Francisco. We had easy access to that stuff. And we had
Mm,
wine club memberships and we were into it. Like it was a hobby
mm,
of mine. And like I
mm,
entertained clients and you know what I mean? I thought it was fancy and bougie and all of that stuff.
mm,
And it's
mm,
just like, we compare it to like if it was in a whiskey glass and if it was brown, it would
mm-hmm,
not be like that, right? Like it would be a
mm,
totally different thing.
mm-hmm,
Like drinking whiskey in the morning with your eggs
mm.
versus drinking champagne in the morning with your eggs, right? It's still alcohol. It's
Yeah,
just so glamorized, right? And we think it's organic and all that bullshit and all that. You post a lot about that stuff, like the healthier wines and things. It's just bullshit. Total bullshit. Yeah.
yeah.
And so we,
Oh my God, don't even get me started on clean wine. Oh, I
uh-huh.
every time I see it, I try and deconstruct it.
Yeah.
Yeah. The manipulative marketing around that, there's like it's organic, there's no pesticides, our grapes have been raised by fairies, like it's like it
No, it's
like
not.
it not the worst thing you can put in your body is ethanol. The worst
Yeah,
thing. It still has ethanol in it. And
yeah.
yeah, that plays, I think, on a lot of women who, like the whole yoga and wine thing. Oh, it makes me want to throw up. It's like
No,
never were two
we are
things never
constantly.
meant to be put together.
No, we are marketed to. I feel like alcohol and wine is the new sex. Like before,
Mm,
like maybe 20 years ago, 30 years ago, it's like we make marketing sexy with bodies and women and sex appeal,
mm,
right? And now it's about alcohol. We add alcohol to all the TV shows, all the commercials, all of the
mm,
marketing for anything that we want to do. Small businesses, women empowerment. We slap a glass of wine on there, and now it's cool and
mm,
sexy,
mm,
right? It's weird. Like I think we all need to remember that
mm,
we are constantly being marketed to, and we're so influenced. Like we're
mm,
humans. We want to be a part of the crowd. We want to be cool. We want to be connected. And when we see these messages, it makes it really confusing for people. Like, well, and we don't, it's not conscious, right? We're not constantly like, that's a marketing message. That's a marketing message, unless you're like us, right? But
mm,
like the normal people that are struggling with this, they see that and they're like, well, my problem's not bad enough, right? Like
mm.
going back to like, I think sometimes the gray area drinking is even worse than being at the bottom because you can stay there for so long and waste years of your life.
I Gray area drinking. What I want to say about that is culturally, there's a lot of smoke and mirrors around it, where
Hmm.
I'm sort of like, sometimes I feel it's a bit too much of a euphemism. It's like you can't be a little bit pregnant. You can't, it's like
Right.
it is. It's a sort of euphemism for that kind of middle class. I only drink clean, fine wine. I do yoga. Like, what's the problem type thing. And it's like, I think when you scratch the surface and see how you feel, how people feel underneath, it's actually the same as how someone feels whether they're drinking like every day and every morning. The
Mhm.
self-loathing, the fear, the anxiety, the constant kind of all of that stuff. I don't think how they feel inside is actually that different.
Yeah, but we mask it, right? And then we can
Yes.
like so I think if it doesn't look externally how it might look for somebody who's drinking in the morning or
Mm,
really is struggling outwardly, right? But we
mm,
mask it with these things. We can keep that problem going for longer, right?
mm-hmm.
Like we can go decades of living that
Yeah.
life without getting
Yeah.
help. Yeah.
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 Yeah, I agree.
Okay. So one other thing I wanted to talk about was processing the past.
Mm-hmm.
So you talk a little bit about that in the book. I don't remember what page that is on. But talk to me a little bit about that. So I think a lot of people are scared of that. Like they want to just like focus on in the future and like not really digging into the past. But obviously our patterns are created for a
Yeah.
reason, right? And you talk a little bit about little traumas and everybody by reaching a certain age has experienced some form of trauma in their life. So
Mm.
let's just dive into that for a couple of minutes.
Yeah, yeah, that there is people will say, I don't want to rake over the past. The past shows up in our present every day. Every day in our
Hmm.
behavior and our feelings and how we respond to the world. So it's really, I reframe it. It's really about understanding ourselves so we can be free.
Hmm.
It's I think everybody has some kind of wound from childhood or when they were younger that needs some attention and some healing. I think it's understanding why we respond the way we do to the world, why we feel the way we do, why we act, and it's just another way to get to get free. You know, we I spent. I try to numb and run. I put all my effort and energy into numbing and running. And then I discovered that actually working through it was easier and required less effort and was less painful than the numbing and the running. So
Yeah.
for me, it's honoring our past selves. When I look back at not just my childhood, but certainly when I was a young woman drinking and how awful I felt then and some of the things that happened to me. Like she really deserves some time and energy to be honored and those feelings to be validated. A lot of it is about validating our
Hmm.
feelings. So um, it does feel scary, but the reality of it is actually far less than the thought of it. And it's really, it's so that I can be free of the stuff that has really kind of limited me And that the good stuff from my past I can take, and the stuff that doesn't serve me, I can let go of. I have two boys. They're quite young, 10 and 7. And I thought when I had my first one that I was absolutely going to be a perfect mother, because I knew so much about emotional intelligence, all that kind of stuff. And much to my surprise, I started parenting like my mother. And that was the last thing I wanted to do. And had behaviors that I was really unhappy with. So I had to unpick that and change it. And still, despite everything I know, all my self-awareness, I know that there's going to be some stuff that we give to our kids that's going to be unhelpful to them. And I'm going to tell them that when they're young men. I'm going to say, you may have picked up some thought or behavior patterns from us that we didn't mean to give you, that are not helpful to you. And the work of adulthood is to unpick them and get rid of them, so that you don't get limited by them.
Yeah, I love that. And I have 3 kids, and they're young too, 12, 10, and 8.
Yeah.
So it's right in the thick of it, right? It's like, here we
Yeah.
go. And I see that it's
Sorry, go on.
no, it's just something I'm glad I have the skills, right? And I have the resources to get to work through some of that. But what you wrote in the book was like, these were some of these patterns that you can uncover about yourself, like, what's wrong with me? Or it's my fault, right? Some of these are like, you know what I mean? Like some of those very common belief systems that we all adapt at some point as children, right? And we carry that with us in our adult lives. And I just love what you wrote. It's like, we're just programmed incorrectly. Like everybody reacts to things differently, especially as children. Like, we don't know what thing we're going to say as mothers today that will leave an imprint on our children forever. Unfortunately, like we can't figure that out because everybody is different, right? So some comment or something that was said to me as a child, I made that meant that I was wrong and it was my fault. And so that just became this very ingrained belief system, so that anything sort of sticky or uncomfortable, somebody pushes back on me, oh, I've done something wrong, right? So like for me to uncover that through therapy and like digging that up and processing that is so helpful, because now I don't have to take action from that place. I don't have to live in shame and like spin out and like second guess myself and all that shit. I can be like, oh, there's my pattern again. I can process and breathe through that and make the next best decision, right? And I do agree with you that it's like that kid back then didn't get a chance didn't have those tools to process feelings, or our parents didn't know how to tell us how to do that or whatever, right? And now it's our responsibility as adults to do that for ourselves so we can live the best life that we can.
Yeah. So it's otherwise we're just we're kind of running on autopilot. So if my mother's primary purpose in life is to be frightened about things and to warn you about the things she's frightened about that could happen, that could go wrong. And I always had a big, that was very difficult for me to deal with, because I always felt like all the time. And so I think in my past I've been quite reckless. And then a few years ago, my best friend pointed out to me, she said, we were having a conversation about something, and she said, Veronica, you can catastrophize things quite a lot. And she said it and I heard it. And I was like, as soon as I heard it, I could see it. And I was like, oh, she's right. I do that. I kind of do, but what if? And I know, and I knew where that came from. And as soon as she said it and I could see it, it's something that I think I still do, can go into it sometimes, but I'm much more aware of it, of like, this is just, you kind of go down this road and it's not helpful.
Yep.
And it's, that's growth, that's processing the past. It's like something was revealed to me and I can begin to let go of it because it's not helpful.
Yeah. And aren't you glad that you know that about yourself though? Like you recognize that. You can see it, or you're conscious of it. You can kind of be like, okay, that's not there's no threat here. I'm safe. Like, it's okay. And like it just helps you move through life easier, I think. And it doesn't stop you from doing some of the bigger things and go after your dreams and goals that you have.
Yeah, exactly.
So, cool. Well, those were my major points I wanted to come across. Anything else you want my listeners to know? How do people get in contact with you? How do they follow you?
So I'm on Instagram, Veronica J. Valli, and my website is soberful.com, and you can find the book at all of the outlets. It's Soberful. I have a Facebook group called Soberful as well.
Awesome. Well, cool. Any final comments, things you want people to know?
No, it's been great, Angela. I really enjoyed this conversation, and that you have the same perspective as me. And I want people to know that sobriety and drinking is just about perspective. That's all it is. It's about changing how we see things, and when we see things, we feel differently and we act differently.
I love it. Thank you so much, Veronica.
Thank you.
Wasn't that so good? Thank you again, Veronica, for coming on the podcast. And don't forget, y'all, to sign up for the Wine-Free Weekend Challenge. The link is in the show notes. Talk to y'all soon. Bye.